John Niehaus, Director of Program Development for the National Association of Flight Instructors. I'd like to welcome you to this edition of the NAFI 10 Question Challenge, the online video series where I ask 10 questions to successful instructors and try to figure out their secrets and their keys to success. Today, my guest is Jim Pitman. Jim is a CFI, II, MEI, and a DPE. He's been instructing since 1997, and so that equates to about 23 years of CFI experience. He's been a 141 chief instructor. He's been a regional manager for the Cessna Pilot Center in the Western US and Canada. He was the 2006 Arizona CFI of the Year and the 2020 Regional CFI of the Year. His specialties include glass cockpit transition training, instrument proficiency training, high-performance aircraft transition training, and he's been an airline pilot since 2016. Jim, welcome.
Thank you, John. Good to be here with you.
I'm glad to have you. And in traditional form, we'll just jump straight into it. So was flight instructing part of your original career plan, or was it something you never anticipated doing?
Once I got into aviation, it actually was my career plan to be a career flight instructor, and kind of unique that way, I realize. I jokingly say that I knew too many children of airline pilots, and that's just to say that it's no secret that the lifestyle of an airline pilot can be tough for family life. And even though I was only 16 when I started my flight training, I knew before I even did my first solo that I wanted to make a career out of being a flight instructor and be home every night and focus on the family while still getting paid to fly airplanes. So that actually was my original career goal.
Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. And so reflecting on your skill with your very first student, how well do you think you did?
So hopefully okay. I remember my first few students, and I remember, doing the best that I could. Looking back, it seems like most everything that I know as a flight instructor, at least the most important things, I've learned after that point. Mm-hmm. But apparently I did okay. I had a fair amount of life experience, even at a young age, a lot of teaching experience that I think helped me as a new flight instructor, even though I was only 21 years old when I started. Wow. And I sometimes say that I'm just glad I didn't kill anyone that first 500 hours. And, they all turned out okay. Many of them are airline pilots today. And we casually keep in touch, and they thank me still. So apparently I did okay.
I think that's a mantra that just about all of us have as we first start out is let's just make sure everybody's okay. So most of us have had an instructor mentor. Who was yours, and what was the most meaningful thing they taught you?
I've had many over the years. High on the list, Greg Brown definitely comes to mind. Greg has been a career-long friend of mine. He was actually the first flight review that I ever did as a brand new instructor, and that's a story that he wrote about once upon a time. And if we have time today, maybe I'll share the other side of the story. But Greg, he wrote The Savvy Flight Instructor and many other books, and he's been just a great friend and mentor to me as I've gone from job to job over the years. He's usually one of the first people I call for advice and insight, and definitely been a help for me along the way, as well as many others. He's a mentor to a lot of people. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. He did mention that story when I interviewed him previously. So I think I'd love to hear the other side when we get to it.
Okay.
But yeah, that was it's interesting to see how the referrals from each of these that I do comes full circle. So it's cool.
Well, it's a small community in aviation, as we all know. So.
Very much so. So what's the most valuable non-aviation skill you've learned from being a flight instructor?
Non-aviation. Well, something that I think has helped me in a lot of areas of life, and I learned it when I was in management, or maybe I should say I discovered it, and that is, it seems like a lot of pilots, especially pilots who are on a career track, they know they want to go to the airlines or corporate or whatever, they catch what I have started calling the "I'll be happy when" syndrome. I'll be happy when I get through my private. I'll be happy when I get through my instrument. I'll be happy when I finally become a flight instructor. I'll be happy when I get my first turbine job. They're always happy in the future. And there's a big risk to that because I think we've all met people or know people that get to the end of a 20, 30 plus year career and they were never happy because they were always just looking forward to that next upgrade or, whatever it is. And it's great to be goal oriented. And again, this is something that applies in all areas of life. People, I'll be happy when I find a girlfriend or a boyfriend. I'll be happy when I get married. I'll be happy when I have kids. Like, you just got to realize it's a journey. Mm-hmm. And so by seeing that in pilots, that was actually a big part of my presentation when I was chief flight instructor at a large academy. We were bringing in a large class of students every month, and I made sure to always cover this topic. And I've had a few people come back to me over the years like, you know what, I've been in the left seat at this airline for many years now, and I still remember that lesson. And you're right, Jim. I fly with a lot of people that just aren't happy. And you got to enjoy the journey. If you're working on your first solo, be excited about that. If you're a new flight instructor, whether that's your career or not, be excited about that. It's probably the only time in the rest of your career that you're going to be doing it. So enjoy it while it happens. So that's something I've tried to apply to other areas of my life. Just, no matter how difficult or crappy the current situation might seem, just try to enjoy the journey and, keep the goals in mind, but try to stay focused on what's most important.
Yeah, a moving goalpost is really hard to shoot for. So what do you enjoy most about flight instruction?
Probably sounds cliche, but helping other people make their dreams come true. I mean, that's really it. And it's not just any dreams, it's the dream of flying. It's something that was on my heart early in life. I started playing with radio controlled airplanes when I was 10 or 11 years old. And like I said, started doing flight lessons when I was a teenager. And so I love flying, obviously. I love teaching. To be able to put the two of those together and help other people who are also excited about it to achieve their goals and dreams. There's just nothing like it. It's pretty cool. And it's unique. I've never been a follow the crowd kind of guy. Mm-hmm. So, just to do something different. It's the reason I taught myself to ride a unicycle when I was 12 or 13 years old. Just nobody else does that, right? So just I've always liked to do unique things and having a unique career and doing things that most people don't even realize is a possibility is exciting to me.
Riding a unicycle is definitely a pilot skill I'm not sure anybody else has mentioned before.
There you go.
So what's your most interesting, scary, or fun story you've had as a flight instructor?
I don't know that it's the most interesting, but what comes to mind first is an experience when I learned a valuable lesson. And it was a simple lesson, but powerful. And to kind of paint the picture, let me explain. I was probably, 1,000-hour dual given instructor working at a very professional place. I was assistant chief flight instructor, and we were flying F-33 Bonanzas, probably doing a commercial lesson with a student on a beautiful VFR day. And this school that I was teaching at was very structured. We had procedures for everything, standard operating procedures, all that kind of stuff. And I was flying with a student. We happened to be about the same age. I started flight instructing at a very young age. This was in a college program. But just again, paint the picture. He was known for kind of having a chip on his shoulder, being kind of a cocky, loud, outgoing kind of person, spoke his mind a lot. And a lot of people just didn't like him personally. But I did fine with him as his instructor. And the lesson that I learned was we had gone to a non-towered airport and done a touch and go or a full stop taxi back or something. But I remember as we were taking off and we were probably 300 or 400 feet AGL on upwind, I said something like, "Hey, let me show you something." And I put my hands on the controls. And he freaked out. He's like, "What's going on? Who's got the airplane? What are you doing?" He's like yelling at me, and hey, wait a minute. My first instinct was to be defensive, like, dude, chill out. But luckily I was mature enough and aware enough to realize that he was making a really good point, because we had very specific procedures about how to do a three-way exchange of controls. Mm-hmm. And I was not doing the proper procedure. And even though his reaction was arguably over the top, unnecessary,
Right.
by him freaking out like that, it certainly got my attention. And the way I remember it is, in the moment, I was able to just kind of take a breath and be like, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry, let's do a positive exchange of controls. And I never forgot that. It was a little bit humiliating or humbling in the moment to get called out by this guy, but he was absolutely right. And ever since then, I've been very careful about making sure we follow all procedures, but especially something important like a positive exchange of controls. So,
So in your mind, what quality makes for an exceptional flight instructor?
can I only list one?
You can list as many as you like.
The first one that comes to mind is compassion. And I don't mean the kind of compassion like having pity on someone, but really just caring, something akin to love, which is probably not something that most people think about in the professional world or being a flight instructor. But the instructors that I know that have done the best, they're not always the smartest with the books. They're not always the best with the maneuvers. They're the people who care and who can have compassion when the student is struggling on something. And, you know, whether it's just a normal learning plateau or whether it's the instructor needs to come up with a more creative way of teaching something, whatever it is, just to recognize that the student is struggling, they need help, and they care. And I think usually when someone truly cares, they'll get creative. They'll find the solution, you know, a different way of teaching or a different instructor to help out or whatever the solution is for that particular situation. It all starts with caring. So I think I would list that as the number one. Easy to say, hard to do. Some people, you know, some people just don't seem like they're meant to be instructors. Right. And but my experience is even someone who's not looking to do it long term, maybe they're just moving through the instructor ranks to move on to something else. That's fine. But if you just care while you're there, kind of go along with what I said about the, you know, don't catch the I'll be happy when syndrome. Be happy that you're an instructor, you know, whether it's for a short time or a long time, care about it, care about the people. Everything else seems to work itself out.
Yeah, my mantra has always been when I talk to newer instructors who have these grand plans of going and doing other things, that's perfectly okay. Don't let anybody ever tell you that you're substandard because that's what your goal is. But while you're doing it, make sure you put the student first, make sure that you do it safely and you do it professionally, exactly like you just said. I think that's great. So what aspect of flight instruction best prepared you for what you do now?
Well, mostly what I'm doing now is working as a designated examiner, doing check rides. And so certainly all my experience as an evaluator, all instructors should work on their craft of being an evaluator, being a good evaluator. I was blessed to work extensively in both Part 61 and 141 environments, and was an assistant chief at one operation and then chief flight instructor at another large flight academy. So had a lot of opportunity to do stage checks, progress checks, those kinds of things over the years. And it definitely prepared me for being a DP. You know, that's the kind of experience that the FAA really likes for someone who wants to be an examiner. And even now I've been a DP for a little over a year, and it's been as wonderful as I hoped and even better. And I definitely see how all that early experience ties right into what I'm doing now. And I feel like I've been able to even, you know, hone those skills and get better at it even in my first year, and looking forward to the future with that.
Now, sort of a piggyback off of that question, how did you utilize that time as a CFI to make that transition?
So I don't really think of it as a transition. It's more of a natural progression for me. Okay. I know most people who are flight instructing, they are working to transition to something else. But for me, the DPE role has been a natural progression as a career flight instructor. And I would encourage anyone that loves instructing and has made a career out of it, part-time or full-time, consider becoming a DP someday. You know, we need good people who care and are good evaluators and have that kind of experience. So So yeah, I'd say it's been a natural progression.
Mm-hmm. Now, sort of bonus question I'm going to spring on you here. Was it difficult to make the transition from instructor to evaluator? Because I know that's sort of a different set of skills, but kind of a play off of one.
So I have found that one of the most difficult parts of being a DP is not teaching during the check ride. And whereas, when I'm working with my own applicants and, we role play, the check ride prep, or, hey, I'm just a passenger today, you're the pilot in command.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's in smaller segments, like, okay, for the next 20 minutes, I'm just a passenger. And then we kind of mini debrief that and move on to another part of the lesson or whatever. Whereas with the check ride, from start to finish, we are not allowed to teach. And what I do to help with that is I take notes. And once the check ride's over, regardless of what the outcome is, I'm allowed to share my thoughts and ideas about techniques and suggestions and things that I saw that maybe weren't necessarily about the check ride itself, but things that I would have shared if I was the active instructor that day. So I think channeling that energy is maybe the answer to your question, is just taking silent notes instead of giving immediate feedback. And that actually, I feel like that's made me a better flight instructor. I think it has made me a better evaluator to certainly not jump in and help when an applicant is struggling, but to be able to just sit there and let them handle the situation, which, that's something I feel like I figured out in my first, 500 hours of dual given pretty well. But to kind of hone that skill as a DP, I think has made me a better instructor as well.
Final question. If you could give a new instructor one piece of advice for success in the industry and the profession, what would it be?
Well, that time you specifically said one piece, so that does make it tough. So if I could only pick one, it would be to read The Savvy Flight Instructor by Greg Brown. Actually, not just to read it, but to study it. And if anyone has not already watched your interview that you did with Greg, pause here, go watch it, go look it up a couple episodes ago. And actually, or was the last episode? I don't even remember. But go watch that episode, study the book. A lot of good info in there. So I don't want that to just be a cop-out answer. I'm happy to share some of my own advice as well. But honestly, if I had a 30-second elevator conversation with a new flight instructor, that's the advice that I would give them. Get the book, study it, implement it, and you'll be okay.
Well, since you mentioned Greg, I think we need to talk about the other side of the story here.
So I was 21 years old when I was hired as a brand new flight instructor at a little mom and pop flight school. Very unstructured environment, which was the same as all of my own training up to that point. Like no syllabus, no SOP, just, here's the instructor, here's the airplane, go do your thing. And the other side of the story, as I found out later, Greg wrote about me giving his first flight review and him being impressed with how good of a job I did. Well, first of all, I need to give credit where credit is due. I had just come back from serving a 2-year mission for my church, where all I was doing for 2 years was teaching. Even though it wasn't aviation, I was an experienced instructor. So that's part of the story. But also my instructor, as soon as I got home, I spent like 6 solid weeks getting ready for my CFI check ride. I was already a commercial single engine instrument rated pilot, and just took that break for 2 years. So I came back, I hit the books hard, started studying and flying, working on my CFI. And my instructor, he's only a couple years older than me, so he was in his early 20s. His dad was an instructor that ended up becoming a DP, so he kind of had it in his family. He had these old VHS tapes laying around from Jeppesen, and one of them was how to give a flight review as a flight instructor. And it was great. I watched that tape right before my CFI check ride. I took notes, and I just figured this is how you're supposed to do a flight review. And days after my check ride, I met Greg Brown and was told by my boss, hey, this guy needs a flight review. And I basically just did what Jeppesen taught in that old VHS tape. And I didn't know anything different. It wasn't until months or even years later that I realized how pathetic the typical flight review is given in our industry. And there's some people that do it well, but overall, it really is pathetic. And the FAA is not happy with it, and it's one of the reasons they're trying to push the wings program, but that's a whole nother discussion. So basically, I was so naive, I didn't know any better. But from Greg's point of view, being in the industry for so long and knowing what the typical flight review looked like, he was just so impressed, and he wrote a really nice article about it. And that was the day we met, and we've been good friends ever since. And as I said, he's been a great mentor to me. So that's kind of the other side of the story, is I was just doing what my instructor showed me how to do and didn't know any different.
So what you're saying is the additional key to instructor success is to go on eBay and find a VHS player.
Find the old JEP tapes. Well, I think one of the serious lessons to learn there is it's true that there's no complete substitute for experience. However, desire and enthusiasm will get you a long ways. And it wasn't just my desire and enthusiasm, because I was excited. I mean, I was living my dream at 21 years old, becoming a career flight instructor. But it was the fact that I cared. I cared about my career. I cared about whoever I was flying with. And I cared enough to do my homework. I didn't have to watch those JET videos to get ready for my check ride, but I did because I wanted to be good. And so an instructor who cares about all those things and wants to put in the effort is going to be better than average for sure. And then when the experience comes, then that just fills in the gaps.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And Jim, we've made it through the questions. This is about the point where I just ask, do you have any final thoughts, or do you have any projects you're working on? Anything you'd like to talk about?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share. I always like to put in a good word for Angel Flight. Out here in Arizona, I'm part of Angel Flight West, but they have organizations all over the country. I actually had a few thousand hours before I even really heard about Angel Flight. I'm embarrassed to say, but one thing I've realized is a lot of pilots don't realize the opportunity. Certainly it's changed right now with everything going on with the coronavirus. But there are still opportunities to serve and to help and to volunteer, and it's just an amazing organization. So wherever you're at, look up your local Angel Flight and see if it's something you can help out with. Would be something I'd want to encourage everyone to do. And other than that, I do have some check ride resources that I've made available. If people want to go to my website there on the screen, flywithjim.com, and go to my check rides page. My most recent one is a little help guide that I put together to help applicants fill out their IACRA form and understand how the numbers should add up, and those kinds of details that aren't necessarily well understood by most. So I'm happy to share, and if you want to take it and use it and share it, please do. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to come and share a little bit about my experience, and thank you for doing what you're doing. It's good for the community. I appreciate that.